When it comes to measuring your runs, you'll be familiar with pace, distance and time, but something else that's really important to consider is your heart rate.
Yeah, understanding what my heart rate says about me has been so important in helping me to achieve my running goals over the years, and it's also really helped me to improve too.
Almost as important as all of those conversations and runs with me.
Yeah, absolutely, Andy, every time.
And it's something that I tracked during my professional running career. It's something that I continue to track now, but the data can be a little bit overwhelming. So now that there are so many different tracking features available, it's the perfect time to zero in on how heart rate can help you to improve your running.
So in this video, we've teamed up with Garmin and we're going to be going through your running heart rate zones, resting heart rate variability, and how you can use your heart rate in training to help improve your running.
And we're going to use Garmin products to help to demonstrate that. But regardless of what watch you're wearing, there'll be something in this video to help you out. Now, let's find out what your heart rate says about you. Starting off with heart rate zones, training at different heart rates impacts your physiology in different ways because you're operating different energy systems, and also it has a different emphasis on the type of workout that you're taking on. So knowing what heart rate you're operating at can have a big impact on both the training benefit that you get and the recovery that you'll have after that exercise. So there are 5 different heart rate zones, but more on that in a minute.
It's important to remember that heart rate levels at rest and during exercise, as well as corresponding heart rate zones, can vary significantly from person to person. Factors such as age, weight, gender, fitness levels, temperature, and even medication or stress can influence these variations.
An accurate way of tracking your heart rate or working out which heart rate zone you're in is by wearing a watch with an optical heart rate sensor or by wearing a chest strap. Like today, I'm wearing Garmin's Forerunner 965 and I've got their HRM Pro strap on. So what do you do to measure your heart rate when you're on runs? Let us know in the comments.
Now let's talk about maximum heart rate. There are lots of different ways in order to calculate your maximum heart rate. Some are more accurate than others.
The simplest way of getting an estimate for your maximum heart rate is something called the Fox formula, which is where you take away your age from 220 to get a figure. But this is based on using population averages, so it's definitely not the most accurate, even though it's the most straightforward.
Funny you should mention that, because I had a great idea. I think we should actually calculate our Fox formula ourselves.
And you think we need a whiteboard for this?
Hey, look, mental maths, not my strong point. So 220 minus my age equals this.
Yeah. So I didn't think I needed a whiteboard for mine. So I'm 42, so 220 minus 42 is 178, but my actual max heart rate is over 190, so I think it's about 193. So there's a big disparity for me by using that formula.
Yeah, I would have to check Garmin Connect to see what mine is. And you might have realised actually that when you do an interval session or a hard workout, you might get a little pop-up on your Garmin that says max heart rate adjusted. So that is taking your performance data from your workouts and adjusting it for you.
Yeah, and running can actually be the most accurate way for you to go and get your max heart rate. You might want to consider doing something called a stress test, which we'll talk about now.
Warm up by performing an easy 1 to 3 mile run, then run at maximum effort for 3 sustained minutes without stopping. Continue to run without stopping, but slow down your pace to recover for 3 additional minutes. Repeat another 3-minute maximum effort, then save your activity. You can then go to Garmin Connect to determine the maximum rate your heartbeat was.
Once you know your max heart rate, you can use different methods or formulae to calculate your different heart rate zones. Now, we'd recommend using something called the heart rate reserve method, which uses the useful beats between your resting heart rate and your max heart rate and splits that up into your various heart rate zones. Now, we're going to come on to resting heart rate a little bit later because you will need that to calculate your heart rate zones, and you can do all of this manually within Garmin Connect.
Now let's talk about heart rate zones. So we're going to walk and run you through all of the different zones, going through the percentages, what different runs you do in each zone, and how you should feel whilst you're running. Now, the important thing here is your heart rate zones are unique to you. So mine and Andy's are going to be very different, for example. So Andy can run you through the fast ones. Let's go. Okay, so let's start off by talking about zone 1. So this is 50 to 60% of your heart rate reserve. So for me, my maximum heart rate is 192, my resting heart rate is 49, so that gives me a heart rate reserve of 143 useful beats. So if I take 50% of that and add it to my resting heart rate, I've got 120. If I take 60% and add it to my resting heart rate, I've got 134. So my zone 1 heart rate is 120 to 134 beats per minute.
This is a very light intensity effort. This should feel very relaxed and easy. Your breathing is well controlled and conversation is easy. You may find that you're able to walk in this zone.
Okay, so zone 2 is really nice, super easy running. Think your warm-ups, cool downs, and great for recovery runs as well. It's 60 to 70% of your heart rate reserve. You should be able to hold a conversation at this pace with your breathing nice and controlled too. Now, this was the pace that Mo decided to run at when we did a challenge of whether you can stay in a heart rate zone for 20 minutes. He didn't actually spend that much time in this zone, but that might have been down to a few other factors like the weather, and he wasn't feeling very well, which makes an important point on paying attention to your heart rate zones is really important because it can help you to spot illnesses too.
Next, zone 3, and this is 70 to 80% of your heart rate reserve. It's steady aerobic running, and then this is the zone that you'll probably spend most of your time in when you're taking on your long runs. It's a good zone to be in when you're looking for a combination of distance, volume, and a little bit of intensity because it's not a max effort, so actually you can sustain it for a really long time.
So this is the zone that Jess chose for our heart rate zone challenge. Go check out that video if you haven't watched it already. She was trying to channel her marathon PB effort level, which she actually found quite hard considering the marathon was quite a few months ago from when she did the challenge. What she also noticed was that Mo, who was running in zone 2, and I was running in zone 4, she never caught up with either one of us, so it just goes to show that heart rate zones are so individual and it's no way comparable to anyone else's in terms of pace or heart rate, so it's such a good metric to work off to get a really personalised effort for you.
Now for zone 4. So zone 4 is 80 to 90% of your heart rate reserve and should feel slightly uncomfortable as well as being much more difficult to talk. So Sarah's really stitched me up here. Now zone 4 is working on your aerobic capacity, so maximising your aerobic capacity as well as a little bit of speed. And if you're taking on tempo or threshold runs, then those should be in zone 4. So if you're not getting to zone 4, then you're probably not working quite hard enough to get the maximum benefit. And actually, if you've ended up in zone 5, you're probably working a little bit too hard, which is why keeping an eye on your heart rate zones is so important.
I chose to run in zone 4 in our How Well Do You Know You're Running Heart Rates challenge, and it was clear that, well, this is how I found it.
You look knackered.
Thanks, mate. I do feel knackered to be fair. And I am now in zone 5. Zone 5 is very hard, close to maximum effort, and it is 90 to 100% of your heart rate reserve.
You'll be running in zone 5 when you're taking on interval training or sprints. It's the hardest zone, so it's going to be really difficult to talk, and your breathing is going to be much heavier, as you can hear.
Woo! Right, well, I think we need a break after that, or at least I definitely do. And make sure if you want to see other challenges like the ones that we've just referenced, please do like and subscribe to the channel.
Yeah, make sure you hit that subscribe button, but now seems like the perfect opportunity to talk about resting heart rate. You might think that with running, your active heart rate is the only thing that you should care about, but actually your resting heart rate is equally as important, and in fact, it can tell you some really important things about your physical well-being without you even knowing.
To measure your resting heart rate, you want to take your index and middle finger and place it just underneath your thumb so that you can feel your pulse, then count the beats for up to a minute. It's best to do this sitting or lying down, and ideally just after you've woken up in the morning.
And most Garmin watches have an optical heart rate sensor on your wrist that can measure your heart rate while you're wearing the watch. So if you wear your watch all of the time, the benefit of this is that 1, you don't have to manually do it every morning, and 2, you can track the progress of your resting heart rate over time and look at trends.
You can check your data in Garmin Connect to give you an average reading. This incorporates your heart rate whilst you sleep, which is essential to other metrics you might be using.
The average resting heart rate for adults is said to be between 60 and 100 beats per minute, but well-trained athletes might find that their resting heart rate is lower than this because they're conditioned to perform as efficiently as possible. Marathon runners and endurance athletes, for example, might find that their heart rate is between 30 and 40 beats per minute. What was yours when you were a well-trained athlete?
You're classing me as a well-trained athlete?
You were, yeah.
Brilliant. So I think my resting heart rate was high 30s, low 40s, so the top end of that range you talked about then. I wasn't a marathon runner, but I did used to measure my resting heart rate every morning when I woke up and keep a track of that baseline over time, and it was a really good early indicator for me of extra fatigue or potentially illness maybe.
Wow, you really knew how to live before your watch could just do it all
Yes,
for
I
you.
did.
But resting heart rate is such a good health indicator as well, so if you do pay close attention to your resting heart rate and it does become a little bit higher than normal, it might be a sign of illness or that something in your body isn't quite right.
Something in my body is not quite right now. So I think we need to get our heart rates back up and go for a run.
Right, let's
okay.
go.
Now let's talk about HRV, which is heart rate variability.
Yeah, so back in Andy's day, we were recently talking
it.
on the podcast about how he used to wear this when he was training. I'm honestly not sure how you survive.
Yeah, and other than sundials, we did actually have ways of telling the time. So we used to use basic stopwatches, and I had a very basic functionality heart rate monitor. But back to heart rate variability, that is the measure of the time gap between successive heartbeats, or at least the variation in those time gaps.
Yeah, so if your watch does track HRV, it can be a really useful tool to help monitor your overall well-being, how your body's managing stress and recovery too.
It helps you to understand the balance in your body between the parasympathetic and the sympathetic nervous systems. Now, the sympathetic nervous system activates when you're under stress. It leads to an elevated heart rate and an increase in the regularity of your heartbeat, so effectively a reduction in your HRV.
When you're relaxed, it's the parasympathetic nervous system that's activated. So this will slow your heartbeat down and will lead to a more irregular heartbeat rhythm.
If you've got a balanced HRV, then that probably means you're dealing pretty well with day-to-day stress and training and recovery. But if your HRV score falls outside your personalised baseline, whether that's too high or too low, then that probably means you might be more stressed, doing a little bit too much training, not sleeping very well, or potentially you just need a little bit more recovery. But it's really important to know that HRV is incredibly personalised, so it's important to understand what's normal for you.
Lots of different things can impact your HRV, such as lack of exercise, diet, alcohol and caffeine. So your watch will give you a 7-day average of your HRV. It's important to wear your watch when you're sleeping as well to make sure that your reading is as accurate as possible. And if your HRV is in the red or the orange, it might be a sign that you need to prioritise sleep or recovery.
Your heart rate influences so many key metrics and factors other than just your training. It includes your overall fitness and your well-being as well.
Yeah, and whether you're training for anything, whether that be 5K, 10K, half marathon, marathon, ultra, or if you're even just running to maintain fitness, knowing and understanding your body and the condition it's in can be really helpful.
And most Garmin watches will give you key metrics like training readiness, training status, body battery, and stress score that provide you with key insights on how your body's doing and your readiness for training. So you might be ready to take on a really tough workout, but at other times, you might actually be better off easing back and taking a little bit extra recovery.
Yeah, and heart rate and HRV data will feed into these metrics too. So knowing and understanding your heart rate will tell you everything you need to know about you.
Nice, so hopefully all of this insight has been useful to you to help you with your running. Please make sure you're subscribed to the running channel. Now it's just time for you to go and check out this video where I got all of the top tips about Garmin watches straight from the Garmin experts.